Good evening. I'm Professor Helen Smith, Head of the Department of English and Related Literature at the University of York. It's a tremendous pleasure to welcome you to tonight's event, which forms part of our series of university-wide events marking the Black History Month of October. Black History Month in the UK is in its 33rd year, celebrated and recognised across the country in schools, city centres, cinemas, festivals and more. The theme for 2020 is Celebrating Black Voices, Celebrating Black History. And although it's in a different format this year, here at the university, we've been hosting a variety of online events to celebrate Black contributions to British society and to foster an understanding of Black history. In addition to its celebratory aspects, this month presents an engaging set space of mutual reflection on the achievements and innovative contributions of Black Britons and Black people from around the world to the social, political and cultural development of the United Kingdom. I do have a few technical notes just as we get started. If you're watching live, you can ask questions using the Q&A button on your screen, and it's available there throughout Peter and my conversation, so you can ask questions at any time. If you do have technical issues at any point this evening, including a loss of Wi-Fi, you can rejoin this event using the original link. And please do remember as well that today's event is recorded, so you should be able to watch again, but please do give it a couple of days before looking for that on our events YouTube channel for the university. I'm going to briefly share a few slides and I will just speak for 6 or 7 minutes to introduce Peter and some of his work before we move into an opportunity for conversation. I have a few questions myself that I will be asking Peter and asking him to reflect upon, but we very much welcome contributions and questions from the audience. So please do use the Q&A box there to add things that you'd like to ask and to see if Peter has space to answer them. And any questions that we don't have time to answer this evening, we can still collect together and share with Peter so that he's got an opportunity to enjoy them and reflect upon them later. So I'm just going to share a handful of slides now. I should warn you as well that there is one slide which includes some sound. I can't control the volume of that, so please, just if you're wearing headphones and so on, be a little bit careful in case it comes through quickly, a little noisily, but it shouldn't be too bad, and it's just a short clip that I'll be playing in a couple of slides' time. So Peter Brathwaite was born in Manchester and graduated with a first in philosophy and fine art from Newcastle University. He holds a master's with distinction from the Royal College of Music, where he studied with Russell Smythe as a scholar at the International Opera School. Peter continued his training at the Opera Studio of Landeren in Ghent. His many prizes include a Peter Moores Foundation Major Award, an Independent Opera Sadler's Wells Fellowship, the Samuel Coleridge Taylor Award, and first prize in the Royal College of Music Leader Competition. Peter is a Fellow of the Royal Society of Arts and an alumnus of the Britain Pairs Young Artist Programme. He was presented with the Winston Churchill Fellowship Medallion by the Queen at an investiture held by Buckingham Palace. Peter is also the recipient of a 2016-17 International Opera Awards Foundation bursary and the English Touring Opera Christopher Ball bursary. Writing in What's on Stage, Mark Valencia lauded Peter as a prodigious talent. A highly regarded baritone, Peter's rich and varied performances have been commended for his sensitive and sympathetic acting, his gift for comedy where relevant, his expressive, agile singing. Just 2 days ago, Peter performed the role of Guyanese political activist and poet Martin Carter, who was reaching in this performance the 28th and most critical day of his hunger strike in protest at British rule. This was an incredible sprezzatura performance, a one-man monologue in Hannah Kendall's The Knife of Dawn. And I will just briefly play you the first couple of minutes of that trailer, which give you a sense of the projects which Peter has been engaged in that element of his professional operatic life, and also just a little chance to hear Peter's singing voice in a couple of snippets.
It's great to put the spotlight on stories that wouldn't necessarily be told.
It's now an exciting time to really make these massive changes in how we communicate our voices in art.
It's a time to really reflect and think about what we need to talk about in order to make sure the world is evolving.
It's important to be creating new work and to be putting the works of female composers on the stage here at the Royal Opera House.
In a great
The Knife of Dawn is about Martin Carter, who was a political activist, a poet, and he's a political prisoner. We see Martin contemplate whether or not he can make change, and it's about him going, poetry or hunger strike, which is going to make the most impact.
We get a real sense of the expanse of his ideas and the psychological world of Martin Carter.
With Hannah Kendall, a music or language is something that I absolutely adore, and I think she, in her music, really makes the whole drama come to life.
Attack is part in politics, instead I syntax.
Now, Peter's talents are not confined to singing, or even to singing and acting, or even to singing, acting, and music. Peter also has an incisive analytical talent and a passion for forgotten histories and for voices that have been excluded, marginalised, and silenced throughout history. He is the creative talent behind, the researcher for, and a powerful voice within the Degenerate Music Project. Degenerate music, music banned by the Nazis, brings together song, visuals, and spoken word in an effort to recover some of the lesser-known works of composers who were silenced by the Nazi regime. It's a reimagining of the infamous Entartete Music, or Degenerate Music exhibition of 1938, intended by the Nazi government to alert the German public to, quote, inferior and ultimately dangerous forms of music, particularly jazz and Jewish music. And it contains bravura interpretations of songs by popular artists, by composers, by operatic composers, and by Schoenberg as well, to give something of a sense of the extraordinary range of musical styles branded as degenerate, and giving a fascinating insight into the Berlin political cabarets and the political climate, as well as everyday life in the Weimar Republic. Since it premiered at the 2014 London Song Festival, the show has been featured on BBC Radio, toured the UK, and been presented in Berlin. And 2018 saw the concept developed into a fully staged production entitled Effigies of Wickedness, a critically acclaimed collaboration that brought together English National Opera and the Gate Theatre. Peter has also written for The Guardian and The Independent. He's a BBC Radio 3 Next Generation voice. His documentary work includes BBC Radio 4's Black Music in Europe 2, presented by Clark Peters. He writes and presents features for BBC Radio 3's Essential Classics, as well as being a trustee of the Gate Theatre in London. Peter's most recent project, and the one that drew us to invite him here tonight as part of his manifold talents, was inspired by the Getty Challenge, the idea of recreating a beloved work of art using only items from your own home. Our head of department, a few of you may know, our head of the history of art department, rather, Professor Michael White, engaged in this challenge himself. So here is Michael engaging in reproduction of Liechtenstein's Oh, All Right, and here drawing on his natural talents and characteristics to reproduce Constantine Brancusi's Sleeping Muse. But Peter brought something new and fascinating to the Getty Challenge, using it as a way to pick up something that I understand had long been of interest to him, a project to recover Black portraiture, finding Black subjects, sitters, and, especially as he moved into the 20th and 21st centuries, artists, both rebuilding and reinventing a centuries-long tradition of depicting Black subjects in art. It's an incredible project that showcases Peter's inventiveness, his acting abilities, his eye for visual detail, and, as demonstrated in a wonderful recent series of Radio 3 essays, his ability to weave together incredibly detailed historical and art historical research with reflections on identity, his own family history, and the past, present, and maybe future of questions of race, representation, exclusion, inclusion, and creativity. Peter's here this evening to talk to us about the inspiration behind this project, how he realised it and brought the images to life, the ways in which the project speaks to and informs his operatic practice, and I hope to tell us a little bit about the future for this extraordinary series. So it's a tremendous pleasure to introduce Peter Brathwaite and to say a very good evening. Hello, Peter.
Hello there. Thanks for having me. It's great to
Wonderful to have you here, really fantastic. So I'm going to ask just a handful of questions that I have, and please, to audience members, do feel free to add things into the Q&A. I'll keep an eye on it there and bring in your questions as we go through the evening. So basically, Peter, as a kind of straightforward starting question, can you tell us a little bit more about the project, the inspiration for the series, and how it got started?
So I'd seen the Getty Challenge online on Twitter, and the challenge was to recreate works of art in your own home using what you have to hand. And I thought I'd give it a go. I wasn't sure how I'd start, but it seemed like a good way to pass some of the time at the start of lockdown. And so I began with a portrait of a Black servant in England, an 18th century portrait. And from there, it developed into what it's become today. 85 portraits or so later.
And did you have a sense that there were this many portraits that you would be reenacting, recreating, working with as you started the project?
No idea. There were a few that I knew already, and I sort of exhausted that list, and I was looking through various websites. I was on Pinterest, and I was ordering brochures from past exhibitions, trying to work out what I could recreate with what I had to hand. And um, but the more I did it and got involved with the project, I realized that it could actually be um, of some value in terms of uncovering lost histories um, and putting a spotlight on these stories and these forgotten stories.
Brilliant. And in many of the portraits, what's striking is your use of family heirlooms and household objects. And in one sense, of course, that's you responding to the Getty challenge. You're not supposed to use anything from outside your house. And as you know, you were also in lockdown, so you really couldn't do much to actually kind of expand your canvas. But you talk really interestingly, and certainly many of the images I've seen, you know, particular things that you've used and what they mean to you. And I wonder if you could tell us a bit more about how that started and how, I suppose, how deliberate a way of approaching the project that was from the beginning, and how much it was something that kind of evolved.
Well, it was influenced by my family tree research, which I'd been really involved with last year before lockdown. And then when lots of my work was cancelled and I realized that I had more free time on my hands, I decided to revisit that family tree research and try and dig a bit deeper and go a bit further back as well. Um, and so through that, I was finding images of ancestors of white ancestors through my Barbadian heritage, plantation owners and the like, and I was finding more and more of these, but no images of my black ancestors from um, that time. And I had a few items to hand at home that my mum has given me, and they're really folk items, and they're for use. They're not for display. One of them being the patchwork quilt that my grandmother made, um, and it's made from um, shards of fabric that she had around the house. And so in the same way as the Getty challenge uses things from around the home, that's echoed in this quilt as well. And also this item, the cuckoo stick, which is a cooking implement that's used to stir the Barbados national dish, and it was carved by my grandfather. And when I couldn't find any portraits of black ancestors, I decided that a way of bringing their stories to life was through these objects, and quite humble objects that are used every day, and but they really speak to the histories of not just my family, but to transatlantic history and British history. And this stick that's used to stir cuckoo, which is a dish made from cornmeal and okra. It's the national dish of Barbados, and it's something that came with the enslaved Africans who were brought from the west coast of Africa to the Caribbean. So yeah, there's a lot of symbolism there and weight in these objects, and I started to experiment with putting them into my recreations and elevating them in the same way that these artists elevated the riches of their patrons, and these golden shells and goblets and various items. And so yeah, the Paston treasure from 1665 is probably the clearest example of this subversion of using these domestic items in a way where they can be elevated and celebrated, and these new well, not new histories, they've always been there, but marginalized histories can be told and explored.
Fantastic. And so you mentioned the past and treasure. I suppose one of the interesting things in seeing you think about objects in your recreations of these paintings and so on, I suppose, is also that you've evidently been thinking about consumption and consumerism. And I suppose you've been thinking about art as something that is used to particular ends and is kind of used as a way of showing off the ability to engage in consumerism and all of these things, and this kind of history of art objects as themselves luxury objects, but also ways of kind of showing off of goods. And I wonder how lockdown and how the kind of experience of 2020 Britain, with everything that means, has kind of fed into your thinking about those themes.
Yeah, I think being isolated and at home, and having to stay home, you really start to think about the things around you and the things that have value, and how we use things, and this the idea of sustainability, and how we reuse and rework and rethink as well, and that all feeds into that, the concept of reworking and rethinking, and about our past and about where we're going. And I think that's something that is at the forefront of our minds at the moment, about our futures and what that means.
One of the other things I was struck by, and this is almost something I hesitate to ask in a way, because obviously the subjects of many of these pictures are really serious, and the way in which I've heard you talk about them is kind of very thoughtful and very full. But at the same time, I was very struck by the humour that's evident in a lot of the recreations. And I wondered again how much that was something that you'd started off kind of with as a deliberate strategy, or it's something that you wanted to put in there, or if it's a kind of byproduct of trying to make brilliant works of art with household objects, or how that kind of worked and how that came about.
It's a combination of things. I think the necessity of trying to find replacements for objects in these works of art, the humor occurs naturally, but then the humor is a really useful tool in sort of letting people in to this history and these histories, and exploring difficult history as well. And I find that a lot of people have commented on the fact that the humor has been a way of exploring things that they wouldn't necessarily have thought of exploring before. So I'm really happy that aspect developed along the way, as I started to do more and more. And it's really great when you just put a few different objects together, and a dialogue is created that you didn't really expect to happen, and you step back from the recreation and see it side by side with the original. And there's humor within the reworking, but then the way it talks to the original creates another humor as well, another layer, and that's what I'm really interested in, the layers of the humor and the subversion, and the pain as well within a lot of these images.
Absolutely. I do want to just pause and kind of address our audience and say, please do feel at this moment that you can start to add your questions to the Q&A box there. I have lots of questions I can ask, but I also don't want to hog the stage if people have questions to ask. So please do feel you can add questions, and I'm very delighted to have the chance to share them with Peter. And although I can't promise that my technical skills are totally brilliant, if we want to look at a few pictures, if you have questions about any particular pictures or want to ask about the images themselves, I certainly can share some of those on the screen, and we can do that. So please do feel that you can ask questions. And obviously, if you've shared the project and seen the project develop, you might have some quite specific questions. But if you'd also like to know just a bit more about the inspiration and the ideas behind the project, then that's also something we're really happy to talk about. So please do throw in ideas and questions, and we really look forward to seeing what you want to ask. I suppose one of the things I was interested in too was the sense that you've obviously done with some of the pictures in particular a lot of research. You clearly have thought really carefully about these. There's a real kind of intelligence and acuity to the way in which you've interpreted them that goes along with that humour. Was that something that you were already interested in doing? Was that something that kind of got pulled out of you by the project? And what were the challenges of doing it?
At the start, I was doing little bits of research, but I thought it was necessary, because lots of these paintings are unknown, or they've been forgotten, and so providing context as well, especially for images that are difficult to look at, especially if there are elements like enslaved collars and shackles, and especially when the subjects are children in these positions as well. So I thought it was important from the offset to give context, and but then as the project developed, the research became uh, greater, and I started to really enjoy um, looking at the parallels between other works that I'd already recreated, and I was encouraged by Miranda Kaufman actually to put all of the images on my website in chronological order, and so that started to throw up lots of different questions about the progression of these images over time, and the patterns and parallels, um, and also, yeah, so more and more research grew out of that as well. So um, I find that now I probably do, yeah, a lot more research than I did in the early days, just to make sure that I know the context, and I'm aware of the stories, and the people behind the portraits as well.
And I loved hearing about, I think it was the portrait of Emmanuel Rio, that actually the art gallery didn't know the subject of that painting before your project, and then actually this project has kind of pushed into being the research that's actually recovered the identity of one of those subjects. I thought that was an incredible story, incredible moment.
Fascinating to research Emmanuel Rio, because at the time I didn't know that's who it was. It was a portrait of a horn player in the court of Francis the First, um, and then when I came back to research for the essay for Radio 3, I saw on the website of the Chicago Institute of Art that his name was there, and so yeah, this was a huge revelation, and there's just so much about him if you do a bit of digging, and so that's been really brilliant to put a name to that face, and especially as a musician as well.
Yeah, no, that's lovely. And I hope we'll come back to some questions about music and the way in which that kind of played into this project. No pun intended, about the way in which that played into the project as well. But we have got some questions from the audience. And the first one is very practical
Okay.
one, and you may have to confess if you cheated. But the question is, how strict was the use of home-only props? Could you, for instance, obtain paints from outside the home, that kind of thing?
I have a lot of stuff that I've collected over the years, so it's I've been as strict as I can be. Some people have given me things. I've got someone sent me some feathers, which meant that I was able to create a very nice sort of 18th century hat. But most of the stuff that I have is from the loft or from charity shops, and I've always collected things, stamps and coins and all sorts of things, and reluctant to throw things away. So this was the perfect opportunity to use them.
The moment all your stuff had been waiting for, essentially. So there's a question that ties very neatly into that from Catherine, which is about how difficult it was to set up the framing of your recreations. And if people haven't looked at them, some of these are really impressive and elaborate. There's some kind of really imaginative and difficult looking setups there. So did you work alone, and what was the process?
I worked alone to set things up, and then my other half takes the photographs. So I do the costume making and the set building, and that is the setup time varies. It depends how much I have to make, and how much energy I have, and what's driving the recreation on any given day. And at the start of lockdown, it was when I was seeing that work was being cancelled, that was propelling me to create more. And at the very start, I was reluctant to make things. I wanted to stay true to the challenge and just use objects that I was finding around the home and collecting and curating. But as it developed, I decided that actually it might be quite interesting to to make and craft certain objects for the recreations. And so one of the earliest things that I made was the cardboard ship for Joseph Johnson, and that was, yeah, at a moment when I'd found out that a job that I was really holding out for had been postponed, and I was just sort of frantically cutting cardboard and sticking and pasting, um, and the something like the Past and Treasure, that was a bit like a challenge Annika. I'm showing my my age here. um, uh, Running up and down the stairs, collecting items, and then also creating little charts on note paper, trying to work out what I would replace objects with, and what would happen when I put the quilt side by side with a Union Jack window blind that was in the shed, left over from when we moved into the house. And so all of these things take time, and I'd say that sometimes setting up could take up to like 4 hours. And at other times, if I knew exactly what I was going to do, then it could take half an hour or an hour. So it varies a lot. And um, there are times when I look at a painting and I'm not really sure how to recreate it, but I know that I want to do it. So I'll sort of shelve the idea and come back to it in a few weeks, and or I'll wake up one morning and think, I know the perfect thing that I can use for that. And um,
Okay, I know that's brilliant, and it leads very neatly, really, to an important question from Chloe, which is about the difficulty of paintings, but more in the sense of kind of the emotional work and the kind of the pain of some of those paintings that you mentioned earlier. So asking, I suppose, whether some are more difficult to recreate than others, partly because the materials which you've kind of talked about, but also because of how they did visualize the oppression and exploitation of African people and persons of African descent, and perhaps especially some of those earlier portraits that do have these very difficult subjects, as you said earlier. Was that hard?
Yeah, it's incredibly difficult, but I think out of that difficulty is always the effort to give these people an authentic voice. And I've attempted to do that by using these items that um, that mean something to me and a part of Black history, British history, and the history of enslavement as well, and have very strong ties to that past. So yeah, using things like the quilt, which is an expression of feminine beauty and empowerment, and women speaking in their own voices, is a way of pointing to the fact that these were real people, and they they are defined in a very specific way within these portraits, but just opening up the way we look at them by giving them a new jacket or a new thing to hold in their hand, can, in a way, maybe make them feel less distant and more real as well.
And I was really struck, I think, both by the way in which in your essays you talked about how you might see these pictures differently, having done this project, and how you might kind of experience the pictures differently, but also how they might change your own thinking about your own identity, and that this has been a kind of project both of exploring this incredible artistic tradition and of exploring who it means to be Peter Brathwaite, opera singer here in 21st century, even 21st century Britain. And I think particularly the lovely thing where you talk about the Susan Boyce portrait and actually how it kind of reopened for you and helped you reimagine your relationship to culinary tradition and to your mum's cooking. That was a really lovely example, I suppose, of how that worked.
Yeah, that finding the Sonia Boyce portrait was just hugely influential on me, and redefining how I think about myself and my these aspects of my identity. and things that maybe I'd pushed to one side or didn't want to talk about too much. And but exploring these portraits has really enabled me to embrace these various aspects, even the more difficult ones. And behind me, I've got some of the images that I found in my family tree research, and these are ancestors who were slave owners, and they owned hundreds of slaves, and they were the Brathwaites, and my name I get from them. So it's also been a way of coming to terms with that aspect of my past as well, and my heritage, and ways of speaking to that past through confronting them face on in a recreation. So often I've had various printouts of their images, and they're surrounding me or they're in front of me. And so the idea of how I can face up to that physically in a recreation as well.
And there's a question just come in that really relates to that, which is about how much you had researched that family history prior to the project, how much that was something that was already ongoing.
That was done. A lot of the work was done last year, and that was for my mum. My mum had a big birthday, and I thought it'd be a good idea for her present to get all this research done, as much of it as we could. And on her birthday, we presented her with a hefty journal of this stuff, which I'd always wanted to do and find out more, and because there were lots of mysteries and unanswered questions and little snippets of information that we'd heard, but we weren't sure what was truth or speculation. And so during lockdown I was sort of following the trail further and going off in different directions. And
And John asks, what were some of the key lessons then that you've taken away from the project? Would you have a kind of a takeaway or a sense of what this has really given to you, or that you've learned from it?
I'd say that it's really surprising what you can find when you just spend a bit of time and ask questions that you wouldn't usually think of asking. So just by doing a bit of digging online and finding out about certain books that exist, that are probably, lots of art historians will know about books like this, The Image of the Black in Western Art. This has many volumes, and I got one of them during lockdown to try and find some more portraits, and this has opened up a lot of different work to me. And so that's been one aspect of the project, but also the idea of reclaiming these stories, and the importance of having these voices heard today, and redressing the balance as well, and working out a way of doing that. And this is one way that I've been looking at and exploring. And I'm not saying it's the right way or the only way, but it's a chance to explore how we can redress the balance, and explore marginalized voices, and work out why they've been marginalized, and whose stories have been told, and at the expense of others, and why, and understanding this past as well.
I mean, I think for me, one of the wonderful things is that you're also, with everyone, you are making that new story. So it is that real kind of incredible creativity of at the once being really respectful and thoughtful about other people's stories and the stories that have been told, and who's been able to tell stories in the past. But then there's also a new story that's being created in these these incredible, powerful ways.
And that's what I've really enjoyed seeing as well, the progression of Black portraiture and looking at artists like Sonia Boyce and Bisa Butler. And Bisa Butler is creating art using quilting as her medium, and that's incredible to see that this lowly craft is being used in this quite high art way.
So Kath wants to know, have you got a favourite reworking?
Ooh. I'd say that I used to find this quite a tricky question, but I'm pretty sure now that it's the Past and Treasure, because there's so much in there that I was able to explore for myself and about my own identity, and because there are so many different objects in the original, I was really able to go wild with the recreation. So it's got everything. It's got the quilt, it's got the cuckoo stick, it's got a family suitcase, it's got all sorts of Afro hair products and things that very different to the original Past and Treasure, but I really enjoyed making it as well. It felt like it felt very operatic in its scope, and the original is it's strange and large and mysterious, and
yes, if only you had a pet monkey of your own, it would have been. The question that's related to that, really, which is an interesting one that kind of sits alongside it, but Geraldine asks, what moved you the most in the project? What affected you most as part of this?
Ooh, I'd probably have to say it's a tricky one. I think Joseph Johnson's story I found very moving, and the act of making the ship that he wears on his head, because at the time I was obviously doing the family tree research at the same time, and reading about the Middle Passage and trying to imagine the lives of my ancestors who were just names in the ledgers, and so that was that was incredibly moving, and I'd say that all of them really, that there's something in all of them that moves me in a different way, and that there's this sort of tension and struggle in all of the paintings, and all of these voices that are there that have been silenced, and so it feels like a weight at times to give them an authentic voice and try and do them justice in a way. So yeah.
Thank you. So a question then about a specific one of the recreations from Mira, which is about the Queen of Sheba from the Bellafortis manuscript. So this is one of the quite early ones in terms of date. And if people haven't seen it, it's really remarkably striking. I can try and bring it up if we want. I'm just a little bit nervous about my skills in sharing the screen, but I can certainly give it a go. But Mira is asking how or did this work kind of expand your views on the kinds of sovereignty and perhaps the kind of agencies that aren't Christian and white? So kind of did this do anything in terms of kind of rethinking your approach to histories of art and histories of ethnicities and histories of the kind of contemporary racial politics?
Yeah, I'd say that what's really interesting about these earlier works, like the Queen of Sheba and Saint Maurice as well, who is a cult figure in Germany, and the idea of creating blackness as well, and the questions around whether these people were black or not, and and representation and conversations that we're still having now, um, and the dispute that occurred then and now. So you chart the line from then to now, and there's so much that can inform our conversations today. And so yeah, I'd say that that was an extraordinary one to find, because I wasn't sure whether I should approach it or not, and how to recreate it. Um, and it's, yeah, made me rethink that portion of my recreations, actually, because suddenly, having not had many in the earlier portion, it sort of filled out a bit. Um, and it's especially great to have female voices there alongside some of the more famous male voices that are represented.
I'm going to do my best to just bring it up, but I apologize to everyone in advance if this fails miserably. But if that works for people, and the Queen of Sheba is just here. I mean, I was also very interested, I suppose, in exactly the way in which you did take on women in Portraiture, and if you thought kind of what your thoughts were about doing that, and I think it's brilliant to have that kind of representation, but obviously this like fascinating and brilliant and playful transvestism as well. I kind of wondered what was in your head as you kind of thought about that kind of whole package, really.
Yeah, this one took a while to get together, actually. I was carrying but a lockdown belly at that point, so I wasn't able to achieve the the same pose exactly. But also the costume was very tricky to make, and I didn't have a lot of green in the house. So as you can see, there's a bit of a tablecloth and then a green shirt on backwards, and but yeah, I felt it was important to include female voices, women's voices in the project. And so as soon as I decided that, it didn't really, um, it wasn't really a thing. It was just something that, if I could find something that would work as a recreation, I would do it and include it. So um, obviously the balance is still off, but yeah, whenever I find something that I think is possible, then I'll have a go at it.
No, it is brilliant. I mean, really brilliant to see it, and really fantastic. And that leads neatly, I suppose, into a question from Jane here about just how you prioritized your choice of image. So you have said already, in one sense, some images just spoke to you at particular times or seemed to work at particular moments. But was there a sense of prioritizing artistic or historical significance, or was it kind of prioritizing around what you had available to you to make them? How did you work out what you really wanted to do?
There were some weeks when I just fell into a period or a groove, and one of the most obvious ones that I remember was when I was thinking about my I think it's my fourth great grandmother, who was mixed race and living in Barbados, born around 1780. And I came across a work by Brunias, who was working in the Caribbean around this time, and especially documenting the lives of mixed race people living in the Caribbean, and this exotic class of people who um, were seen as sexual objects. And he really shaped the view of what was happening in the Caribbean, and at the time. And so in the absence of an image of my own grandmother, I looked at these Brunias paintings, and I wondered whether there might be more images of mixed race people from that time in the other colonies. And I realized very quickly that I had to enter some quite horrible terms into search engines and gallery websites to be able to find them. which then threw up a whole different aspect of the challenge of finding this work. So for a period of a week or so, I was looking at specifically at subjects of mixed heritage, living in 18th century colonies, French colonies, and the symbolism of their clothing and what they were wearing at the time. Lots of the French images had the Phrygian cap, to symbolize liberty, and also wearing some of the Enlightenment symbols around their necks. This was a really fascinating little groove that I got into over a week or 10 days or so. And likewise, there were other moments when I thought, oh, right, well, I can look at this period and try and concentrate on what was happening then, and what can I find for this specific moment in art history.
Brilliant, thank you. And there's an interesting question from Kerry as well, which kind of follows on from that, I suppose, in terms of the response to your work. And obviously it has kind of taken off in really exciting and interesting ways. And Kerry's asking specifically whether there has been a response from Barbados to this incredible body of work, and whether this is something that you've been able to kind of get out to a wider audience and kind of get kind of responses across the Caribbean, or whether there might be possibilities of exhibiting and so on.
Yeah, well, I'm having conversations with the Barbados Museum about the work, and they actually have an exhibition of Black portraiture on at the moment that was postponed during lockdown and is now on. It's continuing, and it would be really great to explore, especially with the objects that I have, and looking at ways of exploring art through objects and through domestic items, and I'm really interested in that that aspect of things. And so hopefully there'll be opportunities to do something together. And
Oh, that would be fantastic. That would be really wonderful. So that does move us some of the questions now are kind of looking forward and interested in what does happen next. And I suppose also thinking about the relationship between your practice as an opera singer and these projects. And I wondered if before we move to those questions, you could just say a little bit about, I know you've said in talking about some of the images that it really mattered to you to think about music in them and to think about where and how music appeared. And how much this has been informed by your work as an opera singer, and also whether there's anything you're taking back from this project to your operatic projects.
I'd say that the thing that came naturally to me was the research and the character research, because it felt very much like the work I do in preparing a character, and all the things that you should know before you step onto stage about who you're portraying and the story you're telling. And so each portrait recreation has felt like a mini operatic scene, and as if they're about to burst into song and tell you their story. And so I've really enjoyed that aspect of it, and of course I love dressing up, so that's one of the great bits of opera. And so that they have felt very close to performance. And I'd say that what am I taking back into my work as a singer is that I'm just ready to explore a varied range of voices, and encourage that, and hope to collaborate with different artists to find these stories as well, and platform them.
Fantastic. Yeah. And I suppose it's also interesting thinking back to Kerry's question. Almost what that made me think about was in terms of literary kind of accompaniments to your work or something. And almost the thing that comes to mind is Bernardine Evaristo and Girl, Woman, Other, the kind of sweeping scope of the stories that are getting told and the way in which all of this comes together to create something so powerful is really, really incredible. So Caitlin was asking, essentially, as a singer, lockdown must have been especially challenging. And I guess the kind of not being being able to sing live in space. And of course, you've already talked about projects being cancelled or put on ice and so on. So Caitlin's asking, did being kind of pushed in a sense or forced to develop your creative voice online and in this other medium change your relationship with audiences?
Yeah, I think so. I think I'd been sort of reluctantly using social media beforehand, and then when lockdown happened, it became the world. Was in social media, and that's where my social interaction was happening, and so um, yeah, I think it took me a while to get my head around actually taking the plunge and doing the Getty challenge, and but then when it became quite a thing, yeah, it was a bit scary, but yeah, it's definitely changed the way I interact with people online, and also the things that I choose to share online now, and how we can use social media as an educational tool and a tool for dialogue and discussion and growth, and yeah.
Just how fast did it take off? Kind of, was it with the first image that you did, or did it take a few days to build, or kind of when did you realize that you'd done something perhaps you weren't quite expecting?
Yeah, it was. I did uh, a Tudor, a black Tudor, and I think that was the one of them that got, I don't know, 2,000 likes, um, and then there was a run of a week where they were getting thousands and thousands of likes, and I was just completely astounded by that, and um, but it made me realize that there is an appetite to find out more about these works of art, um, and people do want to see it and learn about it, um, and fill in the blanks.
The John blanks in there, yes, the kind of sense of that with those wonderful histories. So Emma has a question that's not entirely related to the Discovering Black Portraiture project, but is thinking about opera, and I suppose in a sense the ways that the same topics that you've been addressing here kind of play into your practice there and make you think about it. And so Emma's saying, in particular, in a time where a lot of arts are undergoing change and transformation necessitated for their survival at a very difficult moment,
Hmm.
what changes would you like to see in opera as an institution? That's quite a big question for close to the end. What changes would you like to see in the institution of opera?
I'd like to see as many stories told as possible, diverse stories on stage, that uh, truly represent the audiences, and the the population, and stories that need to be told that haven't been necessarily told before, and the opera I've just done, by Hannah Kendall, is a perfect example of this. The story of Martin Carter, an activist and poet, um, and putting stories like that on stage in operatic form, are really essential to, um, yeah, really showing that opera is a wonderful art form to tell stories like this.
And Aisha asks, is this body of work itself the foundation for an opera? I think this is a question about where this would take you. So what is next for Discovering Black Portraiture? Do you know?
Well, I'd love it to turn into some sort of musical project, and you're the first to hear it. But there is a book in the works. So watch this space, and yeah,
Will it be a very beautiful book? Is that the idea? Or we will have lots of visual content and lots of beautiful things?
hope so.
Oh, that sounds incredible. It really does. And are there other things, I suppose, if you kind of were imagining the legacy of this project, what would you want it to be? What would you most feel kind of like this has done what I'd hoped, or this has done far more than I'd hoped, I suppose, in terms of thinking about where this might take you, and what this work might inspire us to rethink in relation to our own histories, or to do differently, I suppose.
Yeah, I think I really hope that people would, um, just look differently, and that would come naturally and not be an effort, and wouldn't have to take a lot of digging to find these voices, and that it was available and in the public domain and easy to find, accessible. Yeah.
And then a lovely question to kind of bring us towards the end from Shabana, which is, this is all new to me and very inspiring. And just asking about, can we see all of your recreations in one place? And if so, where? So you definitely can see them all on Peter's website. If you go to, it's peterbrathwaite.com, is that right? So you can see them all there, and on Peter's Instagram. And I suppose then you will be able to see them hopefully in the book. And is there anywhere else you're hoping they're going to be made visible or brought together?
It'd be great to exhibit some of the works and create some sort of show. And again, yeah, that's something that I'm working on. So yeah, if you check on the website and the Instagram page and Twitter, hopefully there'll be some updates.
And this is a really kind of unfair question, but we've had the kind of, what was your favorite picture, or kind of where did you choose them? Is there a picture that you wish existed and that you've never found? Is there a picture you would love to find, but it's not out there as far as you know?
Yes, yeah, I'd say I'd love to find an image of my he's my fifth or my fourth great grandfather, who I know that he was born around 1742, and he was from Ghana, and he was transported to Barbados, and he achieved his freedom at the age of 75. And I'd love to find an image of him.
Oh, that would be amazing, and such a fitting way to conclude the series. If you ever got to find it, that would be really incredible. So it just remains, I suppose, that is us kind of come up to our time, and I know as well that Peter's had an incredibly busy schedule, and he's come out of lockdown, he's making up for lost time or something along those lines, and so just tremendously generous of you to give us this time this evening. Sorry. So the recording will be available on the York Ideas YouTube channel, and if you just type York Ideas YouTube into Google, you can find that, but please do allow a couple of days for it to be processed and for it to appear there. And we do very much hope that you'll continue to be engaged with York Ideas through our open lecture series. So if you go to our website, which is york.ac.uk/events, you can see full details of all the events in the Open Lectures programme and the Festival of Ideas that's coming up next summer. And we'd love to hear your thoughts on the events and to continue the conversation with the hashtag York Ideas. But it does remain, I suppose, just to say thank you. I mean, I think in one sense a very warm and very real thank you for the project itself, which has been incredible and inspiring and has felt tremendously timely this year in all sorts of fascinating ways. And I suppose as someone who has done a lot of the reading in terms of thinking about the recovery of Black history and how we think about Black history in particular periods, actually having this kind of visual element to it and having that sense of really thinking about the presence of bodies and the presence of subjects and how much you bring a humanity to these stories and how much you bring a sense of the people who were involved even in portraits that don't necessarily feel very kind of hopeful in terms of the humanity there, but that sense in which you've brought those stories and told us these new stories has been just incredible and so inspiring. And to say thank you as well very much indeed, Peter, for spending time with us this evening. It's been a huge pleasure to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. And thank you everyone for joining us. It's been brilliant to have you here. We hope you enjoyed it. Thank you and good night.